we are announcing that our next hackathon will be taking place February 4th through 6th online in the metaverse, building on the huge success of this summer's hackathon, which attracted some incredible teams and produced some amazing new technologies and ideas and winners. Our new hackathon will be focused on the theme of identity, but we'll be asking technologists and innovators to create new ideas to sort of to address basically the sovereign nature principles of representation of non-human life, establishing governance models and empowering ecosystems to act in their own interests and to produce and capture value in their own right. It's a really exciting chance to become part of our community. If you know folks that are inventing technologies and are interested in the kind of hackathon kind of community, we're posting now, I think Alessandro just posted a link. We are live and we are taking applications right now. So please share that link widely and read more about the inspiration behind this year's hackathon. Again, it's going to take place in February online. Part of our inspiration as well is De Keuvel. I know we have some folks from that wonderful institution, which is a North Amsterdam-based reclaimed space that functions as a sustainable planned workplace for creative and social enterprises. It's a unique land trust in an old shipyard in Amsterdam. And what we're going to be doing is using their kind of ecological innovations as inspiration for this year's hackathon. And we're also going to be showcasing the winners and the ideas from this winter's hackathon next spring, likely in late May of 2022. So that'll be a chance if those of you who are adjacent to the Netherlands or can come by to actually come in person. We hope we'll have our first sort of Sovereign Nature Initiative in-person event in the spring, showcasing the results of that hackathon in February. Yeah, did I cover that all right? And from SNI, want to add any more to that?
Perfect, Seth.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Well, look, without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed and honored guest of the day. Sam Chevallier is the director and co-founder at ReWild Africa. This is a film and storytelling business that seeks to share solutions to ecological restoration and to enable humans to learn biomimicry. This is another part of Sam's work he'll be speaking about. He has studied sustainable development and ecological design thinking. But he's not just a scholar, he's also trained as a game ranger at the Londolozi Game Reserve, and he is a traveler and guide. Before founding ReWild Africa in 2017, he traveled South Africa for just under a year, mapping trails for Google Maps. And as a naturalist, Sam is committed to applying the fields of science, design thinking, entrepreneurship, biomimicry, and philosophies such as deep ecology to learn how humans can live in a world that promotes the integrity of the biosphere while maintaining a happy and balanced life for humans. He's a really wonderful thinker and doer and a friend of Sovereign Nature Initiative. And we're so grateful to have you here, Sam, to present some about your work. Welcome.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, Seth. It's really, really awesome to be here. Yeah, I've noticed there's quite a few of you here in the audience, quite a few Seth Buckleys in the audience. Just a shout out to anyone whose name's Seth out here other than you, Seth. You can change your name to your name. We'd love to know more about who's in the audience. But otherwise, it's just really great to be here, and we've got some South Africans and just such a global space. I mean, it's so powerful to be able to engage in conversations with people all over the world about interesting topics. So yeah, really excited. Thanks for the introduction there, Seth. I'm just gonna share my screen. And then we can get right into it.
Absolutely. And just to say too, Sam will probably speak for 30, 40 minutes, and we'll then have space afterwards for feedback and questions. If you do want to post your question while he's presenting in the chat, feel free to do so. And we will keep track of those questions and then bring them back to Sam at the conclusion of his presentation. Thank you. Yeah, take it away, Sam.
Great. Yeah. So it's such a beautiful question. This, what does it actually mean to reconnect, and why should we reconnect with the natural world? And this is a question, I think within this presentation, I'm really going to try and just speak from my own lived experience of that question. So it's one of the biggest questions I've had over the last decade, and engaging with it as much as possible, as I went through my own sort of deep experience when I was younger, and I've been very, very privileged to have parents and mentors that engaged me with wilderness and wild places. So very, very privileged. And one of the big things that changed my way of questioning or seeing is just asking a question like, where does your water from the tap come from? Or the trees in your garden, or the birds that fly to your tree, and what relationship do they have with the tree? That bird and that tree to the landscape outside. And I just realized I had no idea. I couldn't believe I had no idea. Actually, I was like quite shocked. Lived on this planet for so long, and I didn't even know the tree outside my house, and I still don't know a lot of everything around me. And it's a great space of learning when you realize that. And I've just really thoroughly enjoyed that question and engaging more with the biosphere. And personally, I think it's just such a great way to engage with life on Earth beyond just the human species. There's just so many more things out there, or more organisms out there that we can relate to and have connections with, other than just ourselves. So beyond, why reconnect? It's a beautiful journey for each of us as individuals in the world to kind of connect with this incredible planet that we live on. And within this talk, I'm just going to kind of speak to some of my own lived experiences that have brought me deeper connections with nature, but also just some ecological theory that's come around that helps us see the Earth is a living system, and the relationship that biodiversity has with the planets and carbon cycles, etc. So ReWild Africa is the company that I started with Alistair Gaines, co-founder, about 5 years ago. And we are ReWild Africa's mission is to identify and shine light on solutions for a wilder world. And I'll go more into that mission as I shed light on some of the connection later. But it's just been amazing to be able to engage with, as a storytelling company, engage with the solutions that exist in the world and sharing them over the last 5 years. And within ReWild Africa, we have three kind of business models. The kind of main business model that we work with is in film and storytelling and experiences, which is real experience. My master's thesis, as Seth explained earlier, was in ecological design thinking at a place called Schumacher College. And as I'm so grateful for the mentors that I've had in my life, and one of them was Stephen Harding from Schumacher College, who really brought me into kind of seeing how important experiences are in transformation and helping us see the beauty and the complexity of the natural world. And so within ReWild Africa, we look to provide deep and meaningful experiences where individuals can reconnect with themselves and nature, but also learn practically biomimicry, or deep ecology, or systems thinking that they can apply to their own individual lives or to that of their own business. And then the educational aspect of ReWild Africa is instructional design for just making online courses. So we built an online course in biomimicry, which I'll go on to a little bit later. But within our storytelling, we kind of, the big thing after all the academia that we went through, it was such a nice place to come to communication about reconnection and just engaging with, this problem that people don't know, that we're losing biodiversity at such a rapid rate. And, our films look to blend science with emotive storytelling, because essentially empathy is the map and information is the path. And if you can't, information is not retained if it's not with emotion. So that's why we've really loved building film assets for companies that are trying to be solutionaries, because it helps them engage with their audiences from an emotional perspective rather than just a cognitive one. There's just other ways of knowing, and when you reconnect with the other ways of knowing, there's information can be better retained. We're not just thinking beings. As human beings, we also emotional beings, and we intuitive beings, and we need to tap into those other ways of knowing. And that's why I really love film, because it brings more than just the thinking, and it brings some sort of emotion and feeling into communication. So, what is the problem that we face? What's going on? In the last, we've lost 70% of our, our animals, wild animals on Earth in the last 40 years. That sort of stats is not, you can't get past that stat. It doesn't lie, and it's telling us, what's going. I think we've lost around 82% of mammal species, and lots of different vertebrates, just less than that. I think it's around 70 in the last 40 years. So we really are on a trajectory to lose our biodiversity, and we can't ignore that fact. And if we don't reconnect with the fact that that's a problem, then we're going to face huge issues, as we know, as a species. And it's really important for us to engage with that, because it is regulating our planet, the biosphere. But I'll go on to that a little bit more. But this is just to, beyond just our own personal connection with nature, this is a huge collective problem that we face, losing all this biodiversity. So here's the Planetary Boundaries, which I think most of you might know, but if you don't, have a look at this this graph. It kind of shows that where we've, as a species, lost the, or we over on the boundaries. So within the green space is where we should actually be, but we are right beyond with biodiversity loss. So biodiversity loss is one of the greatest threats facing humanity. And this is one of, ReWild Africa's whys, saying that this is a huge problem and we need to look to solve it. This was developed by the Stockholm Resilience Center, and it was actually, I first came across it during my studies at both the Sustainability Institute here in South Africa and Schumacher College in England. And it was a huge motivator for me to engage within my studies. But, a big thing for me was, where things kind of began, and that was when I kind of let go of the like defining myself through cognitive thinking, academia basically, and engaged with the natural world. And we got one of the first jobs that we ever did was walking for Google Maps. This is the Google tracker, Gary, as you can see on the back there, and we hiked Gary around the whole of South Africa, the third most biologically diverse countries in the world. You can only imagine, and I have so much gratitude for this project, because for long periods of time, I was walking with that thing on my back, or Gary, the Google tracker, on my back for hours, and kind of spending time and seeing the diversity that this planet holds. And really, that's really where it was like the love, and through experience was my love and empathy for wild species grew tremendously. And I just realized how much, it was just an interesting project too, because it was, I was in nature, but I was also creating maps for Google Maps, and kind of thinking about what the virtual worlds are going to look like in the future. So it was a very interesting project of to kind of start our journey on, how do we begin to rewild the world and connect with nature. And so, I mean, for me, so at Schumacher College, I studied all these different theories, and I wrote my master's thesis on ecological learning through direct experience. And I engaged with various different systems. Once I finished all the research, I lived in the Amazon for a while. As I said, went and trained as a game ranger, and just through story. I mean, the story of like during my walks, I had to do 7 days of walks on my own in the Kruger National Park, or at Londolozi, where I was very privileged to go and do my training. But one of the hardest, most difficult times of my life, because I had no idea what was going on in terms of connecting, or knowing what the species were, scorpions, snakes, leopards, lions. Do we know these species? Like, we don't know a tree and you don't know a leopard, that's a bit of a problem. I mean, maybe you can get around a tree, okay, but if you don't know how to be around a leopard, that's a bit of a problem, or a buffalo, or a hippo for that matter. So that was when the stakes were a lot higher for me, not knowing my nature, and it was such a beautiful experience, because it was such deep listening to how to communicate, and communicating with wildlife wasn't so much talking with them, but it was just, engaging with them through body language, or just how you use your eyes, or just so many different ways. When I came across a lion that was had its mouth inside of its head inside of a kudu, and its arms on top of the kudu, like I never forget the fright I had, but I didn't run away. What actually happened was you shouldn't run away. And you don't know that. You always fear something you don't know. You fear something if you don't know. You fear spiders because you don't know if it's poisonous or not. If you had to learn which, in your area, in your home, in your state, or whatever, what this poisonous spiders are, you would be able to point that out and be like, okay, that's a threat to me. So we don't know these things, and that creates fear. So we need to realize and step up to the fact that we don't know our nature. And what was amazing for me, is a bit of a turning point in that experience, was that the lions were a lot more scared of me than I was of it. And that went for most of my experience with lions and leopards. I've walked into lions and leopards a few times, and they would growl or get away from me as quick as possible. So I started to see myself in the ecosystem a bit more, and that level of reconnection was so beautiful and so deep, because I started to understand that savanna a little bit better and how to interact with it. And so this just goes to what Stephen Harding at Schumacher used to explain was, a deep experience forms deep questioning, and then creates deep commitment, and then comes back and feeds into a deep experience again. And it's like one thing that I'm always trying to encourage in myself is how do I actually look to have deeper experiences with the natural world that allow for this deeper questioning, and then commitment, which is action. Once you know something, what can you do about it? And this is one of the biggest things in deep ecology, is if you realize that we need to have that there's intrinsic value in the ecosystem. You should do something about it. You should say something about it. You should act in trying to have commitment for the intrinsic value of diversity in the ecosystems beyond human commodity. And so this is just a beautiful sort of diagram that Stephen Harding, my professor at Schumacher College, shared with me when I was there. So, and this is really important, this idea of reconnecting with your own spaces, like wherever you are, because we need to see ourselves embedded within these ecological systems. As social beings, we need to see ourselves in the greater system. Like in South Africa, we have a saying with Ubuntu, which is "I am because we are," and that was a beautiful thing for South Africa to engage with this, because we needed to get past like the difficulties of apartheid and racism. And that's massive transformation that we've had over the years. But how do we even go a step further? I am because we are, because nature is the foundation of all of that. And so we need to connect even deeper and reconnect with those ecological systems and see ourselves embedded within them. And that happens through experiencing it, understanding it, actually getting outside and getting to know our nature and the indigenous wisdom that lives there. The people around South Africa, which I had the great opportunity to meet with, they still hold so much of the language with the land that is there, and we need to acknowledge that and bring it out and share as much as we can, because these are ways in which we can connect with landscape and be stewards of the land again. That isn't boxing it or commoditizing land. It's seeing ourselves as members of the biotic community, as what Aldo Leopold would say. And so just to engage with some ecological literacy in the reconnection is, I'll just look through some of these subjects that I've been looking at over the years that have really helped me practically engage with nature and understanding it in different ways. So I'll briefly just go through them. So Learn Biomimicry. Learn Biomimicry is a sister business of ReWild Africa, which is we're so excited about it. It's a foundational online learning in introduction to biomimicry and the life principles of biomimicry and the systems perspective of biomimicry. This is a video that I can play that will give some great context. Here's another great mentor of mine, Claire Janish, speaking to what is life and what is biomimicry. An amazing mentor who's just had such a significant impact on my life.
If I ask you to design a city that continues to create the conditions conducive to life, which is what biomimicry is asking us to do, you have to start by asking, what is life? And how does it work? And what do we need to make it work? How can we do it in a way that doesn't deplete the environment? If you look at a forest, all the things that nourish life are in a forest, and yet it continues to grow and develop unbounded in most beautiful ways. I'm curious about how we can extrapolate the principles in the forest, how it continues to cycle materials, builds soil, brings the rain, cleans the air while it's growing and developing. And can we do that in our economy, in our cities, and in our industry? In this course, you will not just learn about nature, you will learn from nature. You'll change the way you think about the world. You'll change the way that you think about the future of our world to one of extreme hope and possibility. There's ways of solving problems that are so extraordinary in that not only are they creative and innovative, but they're based on billions of years of experience from the natural world. And what I love about biomimicry is there's this adjacent particle, like right outside, the possibilities for us to design a world that really works are evident everywhere. How can we make everything in a way that actually supports life? Just by asking that question, it shifts the worldview of individuals. And once your worldview is shifted, you shift your goals, you shift your design agenda, and you have a new intention for what you want to create in the world.
So, Claire speaks so well, and I highly recommend watching any other videos or having a look at the Learn Biomimicry course to further understand and go into greater depth in biomimicry. But essentially, she said it there, where we are in biomimicry, we're moving towards learning about nature to learning from nature. So if I was going to show you a tree and be like, look at this tree, let's learn, like I will tell you about the tree, the name of it, the taxonomy, etc. Being able to say I'm learning from it, you can say, what is the form and the process and the system? How does it sit in the ecosystem? How does the process of evapotranspiration of water go up the tree? The design of the leaves for solar panels. It's a whole library of tried and tested strategies that have been here for millions of years that we can tap into to engage with the problems that we face in the world today. And with regard to storage and data systems, I guess in relation to the development of Web 3.0, which I'm sure that there's quite a few people that are quite well versed in how technology is moving us in the web, and how are we going to be able to engage with big systems like storage systems of data, where we can learn from how a gene can keep all of that storage within the gene. And so these sort of questions of moving towards learning about how life has done all these things is just a great strategy for us to be more conducive with life on Earth, and engage with nature. And this is as again, I'm still learning a lot about the Web 3.0, and I think the decentralized autonomous organization can be looked like mycelium. I think the network is set to benefit the whole. Decision making is decentralized. There's no central body. Resources are distributed equally to the ones who need them most, and the network is a network by simple rules. And I think there's just so much here in terms of looking deeper at nature and how it's created its level of sharing and decentralization and connection. And when we engage with the development of these virtual worlds, how are we bringing the kind of the lessons learned from nature within this space. So biomimicry is an incredible tool, and what's really important here is that it is a tool. It's not, you can learn to use a hammer to make a house, or you can learn to use a hammer to destroy a house. And what's really important there is the ethos and the reconnect that you have with, the world, that you would apply those values and ethos to your design and system. And that's really important. How can we use biomimicry as a tool for good, for a regenerative, thriving planet? And so seeing the Earth as a living system, this is looking at Gaia theory. And Gaia theory kind of is a hypothesis. Oh, sorry. Oh no. Just reversing.
Yeah. Oh, good. It's also good for us to let all of this sink into your presentation. Is so wide ranging. It's wonderful to have a little pause. And I see Alexander pointed to the Mycelium Metaphor. It's really amazing. This use of these kind of rhizomatic or fungal metaphors for thinking about Web3. I think that idea is out there in the ether, and it's great to circle around it. I'd love to come back to that a little later, but please continue, Sam.
Yeah, so Gaia theory develops the idea of the interdependence within the ecosystem to a global level, with the idea that the biotic and the abiotic life interacts by feedback mechanisms which enable life on Earth. This is so important. Like, reconnecting with Earth and Gaia is one of the most important things that I wish that we can scale around the world right now, because the Earth is alive. It's not dead. It's alive, and there's a relationship between the abiotic, which is the atmosphere and rocks, and the biotic community. And to be honest, when I went to school in South Africa, I didn't see that relationship. I learned about biology on the land, and then learned about river systems, etc. But I never, that only clicked very much when I studied later on in life about that hypothesis that James Lovelock came to, that it's interdependent. And when we start to see that the Earth is alive, I believe it changes our worldview on how to engage with planet Earth. And this is just a really important concept that I think people should engage with, because it might change the way in which we understand the carbon cycle, for example. So that's Gaia theory, and you can go into a lot more work of Gaia by looking at anything that James Lovelock has written. And then deep ecology. Deep ecology is a really, really important subject, that there is intrinsic value. I said it a little bit earlier, that there's intrinsic value beyond just our human commodity value. So just because something's useful for us to make a desk with, and something else isn't useful because it can't make a desk for us, but it's in the way, it's getting in our way, doesn't mean there's no value in that. We're not seeing the intrinsic value of all life on Earth. And that's a really, really important concept. And I think where that kind of came from, and thinking like a mountain, is based on the Aldo Leopold's story, which I really recommend everyone reading, which kind of engages you with the story of how Aldo Leopold kind of walks through the mountains, and they saw that less wolves didn't mean more deer. It didn't mean that there were going to be more deer if they shot all the wolves. And there was this moment that he had, it's in the story on Thinking Like a Mountain, where he's they're shooting the wolves from the cliff's edge, and pumping bullets into the wolves, and he goes down because he realizes that one of the wolves isn't dead, and he looks into the wolf's eye, and he said there was this green gaze staring back at him, and that was a moment, a deep experience moment, that he realized neither the mountain or the wolf agreed upon such a decision that he had made to kill the wolves. And I think the point here being is that he was seeing that the wolf was really important for the ecosystem, and helped the diversity of life within the ecosystem. So another project that I work with, that I saw this in real time and experienced it and reconnected with this, was when I worked for the Cape Leopard Trust, which is out in the Cederberg mountain range. And a lot of the leopards out in the Cederberg mountain range at Cape Town were being shot or killed or gin trapped because they were seen as pests in the land and were killing livestock. And the Cape Leopard Trust was there to communicate how we can solve for this problem, because if we didn't have the Cape leopards, then we would have an overpopulation of some of the species of buck species that would be on the land that would overgraze the fauna and the flora, will graze the flora, and then kill the ecosystem. So we really need these regulators in the ecosystem. And so a deep ecology, and this, I only really briefly came into deep ecology. I really recommend everyone kind of look into it and you kind of learn a little bit about the 8 principles of deep ecology that will engage you a little bit more with those principles, by Anna and S. So just reconnecting with the carbon cycle. This is just another concept that I wanted to quickly bring in, and this is really about animating the carbon cycle, that it is alive, animating the carbon cycle is the critical missing link between biodiversity and climate change. And the reason why I bring this up, and it's one of the most exciting things to engage with in terms of communication for me, is that simply looking at carbon and biomass pools gives limited understanding. So it's a static representation when you see how carbon moves in this ecosystem. So on the diagram on the left, you've got a line above the zebra and the grass species below that. And most people think that, well, yes, most of the carbon is stored within the grass species, and it is a smaller percentage of carbon as it increases up the pyramid, the food pyramid. And so you would think that mammals wouldn't have a big influence on the carbon cycle, but they really do, and so do elephants. And so we need to start seeing that animals have a dynamic effect by virtue of being interdependent interactors in the food web. And when we start to see that the movements of an elephant influences the amounts of biomass of plant species, we get to see the importance. That's actually almost exponential effect that megafauna and predators and smaller predators and grazers and browsers have on the ecosystem and influence it. And this is a big thing here, is just reconnecting to that, just reconnecting to the interdependencies and the interaction from a food web perspective. And it can't just be environmentalists that engage with this. We need people within the web, developing people in finance understanding these sort of interactions, because we can't have these separate systems of governance that don't engage with this problem. We can't see natural capitalism as something that's free anymore. We need to see that there is huge value in these systems in the future to help us go back to the theory of Gaia theory, regulate our planet. These are important there, and this kind of looks into the aspects of rewilding here, which I'll go into now. Great, yeah. So this will be the last video that I play before we end, and yeah, this is a video that we made with Dr. Stephen Harding that kind of explains rewilding better than I would over this chat.
Well, the thing is, we humans can't be happy and whole unless nature is happy and whole. What makes us really happy, apart from our own relationships with each other, is spending time in the forest, in wild forest, in a forest that's brought itself from out of itself. We know now from the science that we need biodiversity to absorb carbon, to produce cloud-seeding chemicals, basically to regulate the climate of the Earth. We have to have healthy biodiversity. So, even from a purely functional scientific point of view, we can make an excellent case that we can't have a healthy human society, or a healthy economy, or whatever we want, unless nature is healthy. We can't. I mean, if we destroy all the rainforests and pollute all the oceans, then what's going to regulate the climate? We are nature. We came out of nature. And if we want to have a healthy psychological life, we've got to have a healthy nature. We've got to have biodiversity, wild biodiversity in nature. So that's why it's very important to rewild. It's important to rewild on two levels, therefore. One is we need to rewild so the Earth, Gaia, can regulate her climate so that we can have a happy life. And we need to rewild ourselves psychologically through rewilding nature. Once we rewild nature, we realize wild parts of ourselves that we didn't know existed. Because when you do that, you start to feel the soul of nature. And the soul of nature is your own soul. The soul of nature is the human soul. They're indissolubly connected. So it's very important to rewild for all those reasons.
But yeah, that's the chat, and yeah, firstly, thanks so much for everyone listening into that, and that was a lot of sort of my experiences with connecting with nature, and it's very subjective, some of the experiences that I've had with the natural world over some time, and the biggest thing that reconnection comes from is actually experiencing the natural world, and that's what I've always been the biggest facilitator. My biggest mentor is actually nature, and getting out there and sitting outside and learning from it has been my journey. And so yeah, thank you so much for everyone listening to that. And I'm excited to go through some questions and see what comes up for you and its relationship to you and your work.
Thank you again, Sam. And yeah, I would love to open the floor for questions in just a moment. And I want to mention too how much, I love the little applause emoji. That's one of my favorite things on Zoom. I agree totally, Sam, that everyone's bringing their own perspective today, and I have a feeling this all is going to hit people really differently depending on whether you're coming from the background of technology or ecology, or coming from Tekuvel, thinking about land use. And but your talk and your sharing of your personal experience is enormously inspiring, Sam. So thank you again. And I want to mention too a couple of little things that just popped out to me. One was I just love the humility with which you present your relationship to nature, like that like deep sense of awe and humility comes through in how you speak about your work. But even also it's great to hear about your mentorships and the sort of the intellectual legacy that has brought you to this enormously practical and applied and lived work. I want to also just sort of introduce myself. I'm Seth Boakley. I'm the writer in residence at Sovereign Nature Initiative. I don't think I quite said that in the beginning, but these things everyone's always rolling in slowly. So when's the time, right? I'm just going to help kind of moderate a little conversation and a feedback session with Sam here. And I want to make one more little announcement before I do open the floor, which is that, again, this biomimicry technique practice that Sam offers through his company is something that he wants to make available at a discount to the Sovereign Nature Initiative extended community. And so there's going to be a link we'll post shortly if you're interested in learning that work and signing up for one of those courses, which are super powerful. Again, there's kind of like a discount code kind of thing we'll post online if you want to get to know more about that. And finally, with links and stuff, there it is. Beautiful. Thanks, Ale. Alexander made a request in the chat as well that at some point, it would be great if we could find a couple of the videos that you shared with us, Sam, just to posting direct links. I don't want to distract you while you're fielding questions, but if you have a chance to just copy paste maybe a link, especially to that last video, into the chat so that we can follow the link directly, that would be super cool. And I will open up the floor to questions and honestly just comments and feedback for Sam about his presentation. But I will say one last thing, which is I want to remind folks again of kind of the announcement we began with, which is that Sovereign Nature Initiative. We just announced our upcoming next hackathon. It's going to be taking place in February 4th through 6th. So if you are a technologist, inventor, innovator in the Web3 space and you're on this call, please check out our link to our announcement just went up today about our hackathon in February. We really hope that you will join us and also share that widely with your community. We'd love to get as many competitors as possible. There are prizes, and the winning solutions will be featured in an event next spring in Amsterdam. But back to Sam. Thank you again for your beautiful presentation on rewilding and biomimicry. Do folks on the call feel free to just raise your hand or just honestly come on, take your mute off and enter the conversation. Anybody want to throw a question to Sam? Who will be brave and go first?
I can go first.
Thank you, Melody.
Yeah, so I actually am not native to the Web3 space. I'm very new to the space. My background is in nonprofit organization, fundraising, but I worked for 10 years for a zoo. And zoos are not, what you think, like just to see animals. Is a lot of reconnection with animals. And we also have wildlife conservation project with the IUCN species reintroduction group to captively breed and reintroduce them to the wild, which is a really interesting topic and very similar to kind of restoring the wild that we want. I guess my question is that I've seen, like in Canada or in Africa or South America, there are big pieces of nature, just not, there are not much population on it. But if I go, like I went to China for some of the project with the giant panda reserves, there are a huge amount of people living on these lands. So the Nature Conservancy in Canada, for example, is really about land trusts and then just like large piece of land that is nobody on it. But in China, the Nature Conservancy is really about solving the problem for the people who live on the land. Like we're talking about land, and then we're talking about lots of people living on it, lots of population. So when it comes to rewilding, how do you do rewilding with population living on there? And is there example of urban rewilding?
Yeah, so great, beautiful and important question. I'll post a video on here that will help give a little bit more context to this, but that's I wrote a paper earlier this year. It was a policy briefing paper on elevating the role of communities in conservation areas, outside conservation areas. And this is from a South African, it's called Other Affected Areas-Based Conservation Measures. It's a long one, it's a long word, but otherwise OECMs. But at the moment, most land is in protected areas, conserved areas. And I think it's in South Africa, I'm not sure on the exact stat, but I think it's like 33% of land is owned by community-owned people, which means that we need to get into the lived landscape and engage with communities in a way that helps benefit the ecological system as well as the social system. And that sort of engagement is happening, and we're seeing that in South Africa, for example, with the Dixie community. It's a video that I'll share once I'm done here, is the rangelands on OECMs, where they're engaged. It's a tool that you can use to engage, a measuring tool, engage with the community that helps them look after the cattle well and provides potentially a way to get an economy from that. There's a company called Meat Naturally that has been engaging from an economic perspective with the meats there, but in terms of the ecological impact is moving and doing rotation of these rangelands of the cattle, which have a very good effect on the grass species. So there's obviously some ecological benefits, social benefits, as well as economic benefits. So the question here is, how do we engage with communities worldwide, not just as that case study, that is engaging with the ecological benefits that are there, knowing what they are, and potentially educating or creating tools in which we can find out what there is, and finding ways to conserve species, as well as finding a way to access markets. So that's been an interesting project that we've had a look at with regards to community-owned conservation initiatives. And it's a big part of the solution. It has to be, the solution is working with communities and engaging with them to conserve land. And yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I want to, if I can just add like a little tangent on to and try to loop it back to the Web3 conversation, even like metaphorically, I think the idea of a land trust, of course, there are all these legal notions of entities and ways of approaching like reserve, conservation, national parks. There's all of these models out there in the world now for how we humans can leave nature alone a little bit, right? But of course, we're enmeshed, right? We know this. And what you're saying, Sam, about community as well is we also know that there are historical relationships to nature and to land that we also want to honor in conservation. And so in enabling and empowering communities to live obviously in a more harmonious way with nature sometimes involves obviously setting land aside. But one model, again, is this idea of a land trust that's sort of owned in perpetuity in a sense, or in a sense is unowned in perpetuity. And I think that's what's such an interesting connection back to the Web3 idea of decentralization, or as we like to say, sovereign nature initiative. Really, we are interested in nature owning itself, which is a really radical idea. And we know that, and we know it almost sounds crazy, right? But it's that idea of a land trust is also an idea of a land that is, in a sense, set aside in perpetuity. There's not a 20-year, 30-year, it's forever in a sense. And how we engage with that land, what we do on it, how we might rewild it or tend it or take care of it or encourage it to grow is a really complicated question. But from a legal point of view and from a decentralization point of view, I think it's really good to study how those land trusts are working in urban and in rural spaces. There are land trusts sometimes inside of cities. Even De Keuvel in Amsterdam, where we're going to be holding our event in May, is actually working on that principle of a land trust, trying to rewild inside of a super urban space where there's concrete everywhere and old boats that have washed up or been brought up on shore. They're trying to do rewilding even in that kind of highly urban environment. And thanks, Kayla. Yeah, if you're in the US, get involved in a land trust. It's a model that has been growing in the United States. I know community gardening and urban agriculture efforts in Chicago that are doing that. Get to know that work more. Thanks again, Melody, for that great question, and Sam for that great answer. Other questions or comments from the group? Feel free to just jump in.
Hi, I'm also new to the space. I'm following Sam, actually. I think we talked in 2020. I'm in the Atacama Desert now, and I am working with a school that is starting with a project of eco-literacy. And one of the difficulties that we are struggling with today is participation. It feels like kind of the Zoom dynamic of not putting camera on or not participating is actually very much embedded in how kids and adolescents participate with the world and how they experience the natural nature around them. So I am wondering, like, what are the suggestions to get involved into the context you have for kids, for young people, and educators as well?
That's a great question, and such an important one, because that's what facilitates the deep experience that can give you some sort of questioning of you in the ecosystem. And the younger that can happen, the better. For me, when I worked for the Cape Leopard Trust, I was also part of the environmental the development program for kids coming through, and that was a program where kids from all kind of backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, from townships here in Cape Town through to privileged schools, would come and sleep in tents out in Cedarburg Mountain Range and engage and participate with that. And so that was based on, they were participating based on grants that they had received in order to come and spend time in the Cederberg to learn these sort of experiences. And, a lot of them didn't really want to be there half the time. But through the experience and the time spent there, they would, most of the time, like 95% of the time, all the kids would want to not leave based on the play that nature created. And it's a really difficult one to create the space for it now, and the wants for the kids to participate in those sort of experiences. But I think like where schools and things can set up experiences as part of the program of learning. For example, my younger brother is doing he's doing this thing called the Epic, where they're walking for 12 days in the mountains as part of their program at school. It's just part of their learning process that they have to do, which is the experience. But that's the only sort of thing that we've done. And I saw someone posted something called the Deep Time Walk, which is also something that was facilitated by Stephen Harding at Schumacher College. And I've been facilitating that. Well, I've facilitated it twice since I've been, I've done it with kids before. And it was just a fun way it's like ways in which you can create an experience for them to learn more about the earth, and can be ways in which to help them participate more. So yeah, those are the only sort of experiences I've had in bringing younger people to engage with it. But the big thing here is just mentorship. They need people, like every young person needs someone, a brother, a dad, a teacher that creates the space for them to engage with wild places and learn.
Nature play schools can be so profoundly powerful. There are year-round nature play schools for elementary school students in cities around the world, and I encourage you to look into those. And also, just if I can editorialize slightly, I think kids are natural biomimics. They are natural listeners to nature. So if we listen to our children, we also can do some of that listening and learning work, because they are naturally attuned to the voices of the natural world around them. Imitating animals comes naturally to them. And I think we can learn some of those principles even just by listening to our own kids. Well, I want to just add a couple of things, and we can go a little bit beyond our hour, but we're coming up upon it. And if you want to stay beyond that, we can absolutely chat for a few more minutes. And I appreciate, Sam, your time here. But just before we hit that hour mark, I do want to thank Sam again for sharing your perspectives with us today. I want to encourage folks to check out ReWild Africa and Learn Biomimicry. Again, those links are in the chat, along with a ton of other stuff that has accumulated in the chat. We will post this video of Sam's presentation and this conversation. And so if you know friends who would enjoy it, we will post it. So follow Sovereign Nature Initiative, and you'll see we'll be posting about it in all of our places, LinkedIn and Discord and Twitter and all those places when it gets posted. And we will also have the links to the videos and the resources that were mentioned as part of that YouTube posting once we put this lecture up online. And we will be doing monthly talks every month, so please stay in touch with Sovereign Nature Initiative to learn more about that. Sign up for and compete in our hackathon. And if I could just add one more thing before turn it over for any final questions or comments. Sam, I really loved something that you said. I wanted to quote back something you said in your presentation. You said, as a problem statement, "We don't know our nature." And I thought that was such a beautiful phrase in a couple of ways, that we don't know the nature that's around us, like you talked about the tree outside of your window, but we also don't know our nature as part of nature, as animals, as beings that are enmeshed and embedded in nature. So we don't know our nature. Your work seems to me to be doing a profound example of how to address that problem of knowing our nature. Yeah, go ahead, Sam, please.
A comment on that, through the experiences that have happened in various places, like when I have experiences in natural areas such as Mana pools in the bush, or Okavango Delta, or just in the Kruger National Park, when I'm going with guests into that area, or facilitating a deep experience there. It's just so amazing to see the inner transformation that happens in people when they start to begin to see their own nature and seeing that they are part of that interconnected web. And I think like being able to, for me, you can even ask my parents that it took a long time for me to actually engage and connect with nature. And I was only had that questioning at the age of like 22, 23, the deep level of questioning. And that was facilitated by the fact that I started learning biomimicry and started seeing that I didn't actually know much. And the reason there was that because there was no meaning for me to really know my nature. I didn't feel like that deeply. And, I don't know what it means to get to that point of meaning for each and every individual, but I think it does really start off with the self when for me, it was just such a transformation for me to know my own nature and just knowing things around me. And, for kids and the future of children who are potentially going to be spending a lot more time in front of screens as they grow older, and the development of technology, we need to facilitate that kind of balance between technology and real world experiences, because that's what develops meaning and value for them, which is a big question I have in the space of reconnection. Any other questions?
Beautifully said.
Yeah, quick comment coming in here. Seth, thank you very much. That's for hosting this. It's been really interesting. Well done, Sam. Really found it engaging and thought-provoking. I think what's come out, I mean, there's so many things that do surface, but clearly the one thing that's quite obvious is that communities have to be engaged. The youth of today have to be engaged. They have to have inquiring minds. But the fundamental shift to try and get the policymakers and people who are in a position of influence needs a lot of energy. And I'm just, this is a comment, it's not a question, but it's just something to I think vigilance and strong pressure from the journalistic community onto policymakers around this planet to push the concept of nature needs half is really critical. And thank goodness, for the COP talks and whatever happens that coming out of that, whether they accelerate to materialize into action or not, we shall see. But at least there is a spotlight on the fundamental things that are occurring which needed it. And it's organizations like ReWild, Sam, is critical going forward, not only for expanding consciousness and knowledge, but acting as pressure points on the decision makers who are deciding how to look after our air, our seas, and our wilderness and our urban areas. So yeah, just a comment, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for that, Dad. Very, very appreciated. I think like a big thing there is like, how do we actually begin to make the policymaker feel, So I think beyond, and I love the idea of decentralized autonomous organizations and just learning from Mycelium, like when we start to look at nature and the way in which decision making and how things work in the natural world and the sharing of resources and collaboration of an ecosystem and how systems work, there's so much to be said about how we can engage with a decentralized way and I guess more autonomous ways, because just when you say the word policymaker, it already creates a level of hierarchy that a decision needs to be created up here in order to affect the world that really needs it, and that's why we all look at COP as if it's going to have we really all, but like how scary it is that we all have our hopes on something like that. And that's why we need radical innovation in terms of engaging with solutions beyond just hoping that a policymaker might begin to feel. So,
Sure, understood. Cool, thank you.
It is pretty cool. Thanks, Nick. Distributed intelligence, beautiful. I love it. Other last questions or thoughts for Sam, or just that you want to contribute, folks that are here. Thanks for sticking around for this conversation. I'm a word person, so I think about the word Web3 came up, and it occurred to me during this talk that like I read a book about Alexander von Humboldt that our CEO Catherine recommended, The Invention of Nature, and Alexander von Humboldt, this 18th, 19th century naturalist, was sort of an inventor of the idea of nature as a interconnected web, in a sense, that notion that we are living inside of this interconnected thing called nature. And that metaphor of a web or a net, I think, has been around for a long time, that a notion that nature is a web. Even thinking about how a spider web is a kind of fractal pattern, or how a fisher person's net is this kind of distributed thing, right? That doesn't have a center. So it occurred to me, now we're talking about Web3, we're talking about this web that is the internet. We're trying to actually bring it back around to the source of that metaphor, which is something like a natural system, like a spider web, or that first metaphor of nature as an interconnected and an enmeshed thing. And so those metaphors kind of come back around in this beautiful way with Web3 and the idea of decentralization.
I think just one last note on that is just being able to see how we can engage with data with, I think it's a company called Planet that are using land I guess they're selling land to be able to show the data of solutions. So being able to know what's happening in real time with fires, and being able to give data to share what's happening with fodder, if there's too much fodder in an area. There was a brilliant podcast that I'll actually just share here that kind of looks to how satellite imagery can engage with us. And something that's also, well, satellite imagery can help with data and helping us move forward as a species to solve some of the issues. And a big thing also is just looking at finance solutions, beyond just what we're looking at. Often conservation is solved by fundraising or some philanthropist that pays towards conservation. Like, how do we innovate the finance solutions towards conservation-based initiatives? And that's what's really exciting about the Web 3.0. And that's a whole nother discussion that can't really happen now. But I love this idea of how we can begin to bring the sovereignty to nature, to see what a mountain would say, or what an organization can do. And I think like that's we're right at the infancy of how that level of finance and connection through the web can bring some sovereignty to nature. And I learned that through you guys. So thanks so much for that learning.
Well, thanks again, Sam. A big round of applause from us at Sovereign Nature Initiative, and to all of you for your contributions, your ideas, your questions, your links that you posted. This is a community, Sovereign Nature Initiative. This is a crossroads. Please keep coming and seeing what's happening, what the conversation is. As Sam said, it is just the beginning of those conversations, especially having to do with self-owning and the financing, and what might it be like for those natural spaces and nature itself to own itself. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will post this online. Thanks again. We'll see you. We'll see you here next month, and perhaps sooner. Thanks everybody for coming today.